So excited for this, guys. Our guest today is a carnivore coach. He focuses on helping others who suffers from anxiety, depression, and other mood-related condition through the carnivore way of eating. Our mission here is to bring people in and talk experience in hopes that these stories may struck a chord in you the way it did for me to inspire change. Today, I'm blessed to have the opportunity to interview this man. I'm so excited. I'm here with Brett Lloyd, better known as Thankful Carnivore. Brett, welcome to the show, man.
Well, thank you so much for this chance to speak with you and your audience and share my experience.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When I was looking, reading up on your story, I cannot believe it because I myself um I'm not comparing your experience with my experience. I think we all have a different experience with it, but I also had a stretch where I was depressed, and there was a stretch in my life where I had severe depression, couldn't sleep for a stretch of days, and I had to find myself again, found the lifestyle which helped me a lot, and I find that your story is a lot similar to my story, so I'm really excited for this. And I love when we both agreed to an early interview. What time is it over there?
It is 9:05 in the morning.
Love it, man. Love it. I always love starting my day inspired, man. And I hope everyone stick around because Brett's stories, it's just an incredible story. We are here to inspire change in everyone. Um, hearing about you, researching about you, and comparing your photos from before carnivore to the present, Brett. Um, there is such a joy in you today. I am so glad you agreed to come on and tell your story. I'm going to just briefly get into your story here. So, you had 40 plus years of severe depression, anxiety, insomnia, and you talked about always having that, uh, always angry all the time before. You've been on a plethora of medication to manage it. There are too many of them to name, right? You can talk specifically about them if you'd like, briefly on each of the experience you had on these different types of medication prescribed to you. It's always great to get in the specifics of these topics because for our listeners, maybe they're dealing with it the same way too. I understand within those years, doctors you've come across has never connected way of living to be a factor in this turbulent time in your life, right? Discovered Atkins in 2009, I believe, right?
2006 or 7 was
Two,
when I first discovered it, and then
mhm,
I stopped doing it
mm. And then
uh, in early 2010.
got better, then back into the old diet also, and got back to depression again. Then in 2018, discovered the carnivore diet, where it all changed for you. And this is when the awakening happened for you, an epiphany almost that you talked about eloquently, when you connected the way of life to anxiety, depression, and everything. We will change lives today, my friend. It will impact everybody. I guarantee it. Take us through this journey, okay? You can go as early as in life as you can. Food is always a great place to start for me. We all grow up in different environments, which leads us to forming our own habits around it. What was your relationship with food growing up?
Well, growing up, I was at the time we thought this was wonderful because my parents had this enormous vegetable garden.
Mm,
And so I had fresh vegetables year round, either picked that day or my mom and dad canned them. And we always had plenty of meat, and there was always some kind of fruit and one or two types of starch on for every meal. And it was textbook standard American diet. And we thought, because that's all we knew, that's all my parents knew, and that was supposed to be the healthy way to go. And out of the four of us, my father passed away in 2020 after 20 plus years of type 2 diabetes. I've got a sister, a younger sister, who suffers from IBS, and ulcerative colitis almost killed her. My mom's had more health issues than you can count, and I suffered from horrible depression, as you just articulated, for over 40 years of my life. Major depression with psychotic features, anxiety, and insomnia. It was a nightmare. And that was from following the food pyramid.
Mm.
And the only reason I didn't, I started experiencing symptoms around the age of 50 when sleep disruptions began, and I blossomed into the angry person that I became to be, unfortunately. I was voted class grouch on our senior superlatives. That was tons of fun. I was really angered by that in the beginning, and then years later, I realized I earned that because I was grumpy and grouchy all the time. I actually worked in the psychiatric field for a few years in my early 20s. I had a promising career in psychology, and I sabotaged it, which people suffering from depression are prone to do, and sabotage things that are good for them. It was interesting in that none of the people I worked with recognized what was wrong with me. Here we are working in an inpatient setting, and nobody else could see the depression that I was experiencing. Of course, I was oblivious to it. But as the years went on, my life became more and more unmanageable. And in October 1st, 1990, I checked myself into a psychiatric hospital in Huntington, West Virginia, and that's where I was first diagnosed with major depression. And then that's when the medical merry-go-round started. I was put on Prozac initially. I took that for a few months until the doctor couldn't get me more samples. At that time, it was prohibitively expensive, just ridiculously expensive. And I somehow managed to survive a couple of years with a low quality of life. And it got so bad that I went to a physician again, and this doctor told me, this was in Newport, Tennessee. The doctor said, if you don't start taking some kind of medication here real soon, your life's going to become very uncomfortable. So I started Prozac, and I took Prozac for the next 23 years as prescribed. And all I did was get sicker and fatter. There was a period for about 2 years, year and a half, where my mood did level out somewhat. And I met my current and, God willing, final wife. And we've been together for 25 years, married for 24. And I wasn't a complete grouch 24/7 for a time. But that time was not long enough, unfortunately. I started deteriorating as I aged. My mood would start to crash for no apparent reason. Sometimes it was the full moon that caused my mood to crash, but we didn't figure that out till later. It was just not a pleasant life for a good chunk of years. And I'm married, I'm raising kids, and I'm taking my meds. We know something's not right, but my doctor's like, oh, you're doing okay. And then a familial event happened that I don't get into detail about. And I had a textbook nervous breakdown. I went for 6 weeks to 2 months with only an hour or two's worth of sleep at night. And when you don't get enough rest for that prolonged period of time, very bad things start to happen to you. That's when you start hearing children play in the yard when you're the only one at home. And that's not good. They put me on a drug called Remeron, which is worth noting because for 2 weeks I slept like a baby. but I gained 25 pounds in that 2 weeks. Remeron is a notorious weight gaining medication. And after 2 weeks, I went back on another 6 week tear of only sleeping an hour or two a night.
Mm.
And then my doctor started throwing med after med at me. And finally, he gave me this drug called Symbyax, which is a combination of Prozac with an antipsychotic medication I can never pronounce. Um, and that stopped my mood from cratering, that stopped things from getting worse. But with that, I would sleep 10 to 12 hours a night and have to take 1 or 2 naps during the day because I was so over medicated on that stuff. So it wasn't a lot of fun at all. And after about a year and maybe a few months more than that, I'm like, I can't keep doing this. Something's got to change because this is terrible. I'm a musician, I'm a songwriter, and I couldn't touch my instrument for a year because the thought of picking it up was rather terrifying because for me, musical's a very emotion-driven kind of thing. And my state of mind at that time, emotions, I didn't want anything to do with it. But so at the end of, 2008, December 2008, I decide, okay, I can't change the things that have happened. I've got to continue living. I came to peace with the familial thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I agreed that we still had a life to live and that what somebody else did to us was not going to define who we were. And, but I said, I've gained so much weight. I don't like this. And she said, well, have you heard about this Atkins diet? Look at it. I've heard some good things about it. And one of the things about being mentally ill, at least for me, was having patience. If you gave me the directions on how to succeed at something, I would read the first sentence of every paragraph and say I read the whole thing. And I would extrapolate from what I did read. And so you can as well understand that things didn't always work right when I did that. Mm. So with the Atkins diet, I recognize, okay, no starches. I can do that. That's easy. You can eat all the meat you want. Cool. You can have some sweets. Excellent. And you can have leafy green vegetables. I can do that. That's easy because I could get full. And so I did that. I followed the Atkins directions as I understood them imperfectly as they were, as I was. And I lost 35 pounds. Mm. And my mood improved. But at no time did me, my wife, or my doctor link the dietary change to the mood improvement. But 2009 until the summer of 2010, I had a great year. I got to go to my 30-year high school class reunion. I started writing and recording music again. I started performing and speaking at churches. Life was going great.
Is this looking back now, just having that full perspective of you've had, or in that moment, do you realize that it's starting to get better? Or is it just looking back now that you've had all of these experiences?
Well, I knew I knew that I was better because I could do things that before I was emotionally terrified of doing, like picking up the guitar again. I had a friend of mine that I grew up with who is a musician. He started learning before I did. I had great respect for him, and we connected on Facebook, and he's like, so where are you playing at now? And I said, I haven't been playing. And he said, well, you go get your guitar and you start playing today. Mm. And I'm really glad he did. I thank God for his urging because it put me on a path that I needed to be on. Mm. And because music's very important to me. I perform now. I have to. I can't not do music. I'm one of those people.
So for a year at this point, were you taking any medication while
I was still taking medication? after the Symbiox thing, anxiety had gotten really bad. Uh, they I was on 3 meds for many years: Prozac, Ativan as needed for anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and for insomnia every night I took Trazodone, which is another SSRI, but it's used off label to help people sleep because it will flat out knock you out.
Mm.
But I woke up with a drug hangover every morning for 8.5 years from that medication. Um, but yeah, I did have a better year. Like I said, I got to go to my 30-year high school reunion, had a good time. I was still, my wife and I look at those pictures now and we're like, man, I was fat. I was fat. Um, but then along May of 2010, I'm like, I really miss eating ice cream. I really miss eating coconut cake and coconut cream pie. I just miss that. So I'm going to go back to eating that. And if I gain weight again, I'll just go back on Atkins, Lawrence, because, hey,
Mm.
it shouldn't be a problem. But fast forward to the middle of July in 2010, and I'm at Mass. I'm a thankful Catholic convert, and it was a Sunday evening. And Mass is very important and special to me. And I'm on my knees. It's right before communion, and I get hit with this overwhelming notion that if I don't get out of there right now, something really bad is going to happen.
Mm.
Something had never experienced before in my life, and I thankfully haven't experienced it since.
Mm.
And so I literally ran out of the church. 15 minutes later, I'm home, curled up on our couch, bawling like a baby, and don't have a clue why.
Mm.
And this began the worst of the worst. From summer of 2010 through till the end of January, 1st of February 2015 was just an absolute horror show. My wife's job, I was unemployable. I was
Mm.
nobody wanted to be around me for very long at all.
Mm.
And looking back, I don't blame them. It became very difficult for me over this few years, that 5-year period. I got so sick that I couldn't accurately perceive my environment.
Mm.
My wife would say to me, "Oh, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day." But my illness would filter that and twist it, never in my favor, so that what I actually truly heard with my ears and understood in my head was something along the lines of, yeah, it looks like it's going to be another beautiful day.
Mm.
And I would hear that and that tone, and I love my wife. And what do you do when you hear that? Honey, what's wrong? And she would look at me. What do you mean, what's wrong? I just told you. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. And my illness would still twist that. And that would never be what I heard.
Mm.
And so you can just imagine, she couldn't understand me. I couldn't understand her. And she kept trying to talk to me like I was a sane person. And I've said, and I'll say it in every interview I ever do, if anybody's earned their place in heaven, it's her for sticking with me. Because I became extremely difficult to live with. When you can't communicate, it builds frustration and anger, or at least it did in me. It just never really leaves you completely. I couldn't perform. Nobody would work with me. You're really good, but you're just too hard to get along with, was the rule. That was what I heard. Um, my wife's job moved. We had to relocate to North Florida, where we've been now for 10 years. And I had to find a doctor. We didn't know anybody. We didn't have any family here. So I spent a year trying to find a doctor who could understand me and figure out what was going on. And that took over a year to do that. That's when they also started throwing more hardcore meds at me, like Seroquel, Abilify, Lamictal, which is actually a seizure medication that's
Mm.
used to also treat bipolar disorder. They changed my diagnosis once to bipolar 2, and I'm like, I don't think so, guys, but we'll give it a whirl. But that didn't really change anything. They were just fishing for a reason why everything they gave me didn't work.
Mm.
Fast forward to January of 2015,
Mm.
I weighed 289 pounds. The last psychiatrist I'll ever have, not named Georgia Eade or Dr. Chris Palmer, told me that I should seriously consider electroshock therapy and or a long-term hospitalization.
Mm.
And I had seen patients 30 minutes after electroshock therapy at the facility that I checked myself into. They did ECT there. And I knew I made that decision in 1990. That's never going to happen to me because those people looked like breathing corpses.
Mm.
And I didn't want to experience that for any reason.
Mm.
And my concern with the long-term hospitalization was, well, I might go in, but I might never come out. A friend that I had found in Florida, or somebody that I met in Florida, uh, I'd written these pieces of these blues songs, these pieces of music that I knew I couldn't sing to.
Mm.
And so I put a Craigslist ad in, and this lady, extraordinarily talented woman named Kimmy Wade, answered it. And we were working together one day a week. And she's watching me fall apart right in front of her. And she says to me one day, have you ever thought about medical marijuana?
Mm.
And I was like, hmm. As a musician, cannabis was around, but I had a bad experience with it when I was young. I didn't have a good time. I got sick. I got lightheaded. I passed out. That's no fun. And at that time, it was illegal and beer was legal. What do I need weed for? So it was just never my thing. But I knew that some of the Western states here, Oregon and Colorado, had developed legal medical marijuana programs. And I did some research and found some anecdotal evidence that some people were experiencing some symptom relief. And my wife and I talked about it, and we're like, well, at this point, what do we have to lose? You've done everything. I took my meds as prescribed. I was a compliant patient. I didn't want to be crazy. I wanted to be better, but it just wasn't happening. So we secured a small amount of cannabis, and my wife found a canna butter recipe, and she made these little cookies about the size of a quarter, little keto cookies. They were oatmeal, no sugar. There might have been a raisin in them. Yeah, there were raisins, so there was some sugar. But they were probably considered keto appropriate. And I was so terrified of these things, Lord, I broke the first one in half because I didn't want too much. I didn't want to have a bad experience. And I ate that, and 10 minutes later, I felt like 1,000 suns had lifted off my body. I wasn't high. I just didn't feel like crap anymore.
Mm.
And then about 45 minutes later, the high kicked in. And I learned, much to my surprise, that the high from cannabis successfully treated my anxiety.
Mm.
It immediately went to zero. My mood improved. It was elevated significantly, and not in a euphoric spike, but in a flatline kind of way. My wife came home that day. I'll never forget. I met her at the door with a smile and a laugh, and she's like, "Where's my husband? Who are you?" And it was something that was very unexpected. I did not anticipate that kind of wonderful result. So that became part of my daily regimen, was a cookie.
Mm-hmm.
And after 10 days of that, I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, Lawrence, and I'm trying to put my shoes on, and I realized my belly is in the way.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, that's not good. And I went and looked in the mirror and saw myself accurately for the first time in years.
Mm.
And it was terrifying. I looked like I was either going to stroke out or have a heart attack at any moment. I looked like one of the new dead in the Walking Dead show. My skin was a pallid gray, ickish looking color. And I told my wife, I said, I got to go back on Atkins tonight.
Eye-opening.
Oh, it was terrifying,
Mm.
terrifying. And so I went back on Atkins as I understood it, but I would have gotten a little better sooner. We thought fat was bad. So we would strain the fat off of all the meat that I should have been eating the fat too, of course. We know
Yeah.
that now. So I didn't heal, but I did lose weight. And over with cannabis and low carb, and I started walking. I started first just walking the dog a half block here, a half block there, because I knew I was at great risk of injury, and I knew if I injured myself in the state I was in, I was going to be in really bad shape. So I took my time, and half a block turned into a block, which turned into 4 blocks. Well, and then I'm like, well, how far am I walking? So I get a GPS program, a walking program for the phone, and I find out how far away from my front door a half mile is.
Mm.
So I could start doing mile walks. And then that led to 2-mile walks. And over the next 3 years, I walked off 94 pounds.
Mm.
At the end of 2015, just using cannabis and the diet, the Atkins, I titrated successfully off of all the antipsychotics and antidepressants. Don't do that at home, my friends. Don't do it with your doctor's care. At the end of 2016, I was off the Ativan, which I had taken for over 8.5 years. That was the hardest thing to come off of. And the day after I took my last 1/8 of a milligram dose, I woke up the next day and experienced vertigo for the first time in my life. I had vertigo for 3 months. That was no fun. And then 3 years in, 2017, I was off the trazodone for sleep. So life is better, but cannabis didn't heal anything.
Mm.
It just gave me a better quality of life. My wife could stand to be in the room with me, and heck, we could carry on an actual conversation most of the time. But I was still sick. And this same friend of mine in May of 2018 messages me and says, you got to go watch every video by this guy named Jordan Peterson. Do it now.
Mm.
And of course, it's what happens to a lot of people when you first do a search for Jordan Peterson. You get the Jordan Peterson Destroys collection, where he, with the use of logic, turns journalists into stuttering people who can't get a word out. I watched him render one lady completely unable to speak with nothing more than the truth and logic. And I became a huge fan. And so part of my 420 routine was eat a cookie, watch Jordan Peterson videos. And in June, I came across this video of him, a 30-minute cutout of him on Joe Rogan, describing in ways I could understand that his daughter figured out if she only ate beef, salt, and water, her arthritis would go away and her depression went away. And then he said, I didn't even know the man was mentally ill. I just thought, he's doing all these lectures and all this speaking thing, and he writes, and he's just tired. Well, now I know he was depressed. He was suffering, but just functioning at a higher level than I could. And he talked about how his depression was gone and his anxiety was almost completely gone, and how crazy it was. Now, this is anybody but Jordan Peterson telling me this, a man whose part of his thing is you know, be responsible. Personal responsibility is important. Don't lie. Tell the truth. He's a man with, I still believe, has incredible integrity. If it's anybody but him, that's nuts. I'm changing the channel because just
Mm.
eating meat alone, that's crazy.
Mm. That's
Plus,
interesting.
if it really was a valid form of eating, somebody surely would have told me by now.
Mm. Mm.
My wife comes home and I'm like, watch this with me because I want to make sure I'm hearing what I'm hearing. And she watched it and she's like, wow, he really means that. He's not kidding.
Mm.
And so, well, I got to investigate some more. And the next video I found was by none other than Dr. Shawn Baker himself.
Mm.
Um, if you haven't read it yet, guys, get his book, The Carnivore Diet, and watch out for the guy on pages
Incredible book.
161. Watch out for that guy on page 161. That's me. Um, and he described, again, you've got this man with incredible integrity. You know, he was in the military. He first served as an officer in a missile silo. If we were going to go to nuclear war, he was one of the people who was going to do the launch. And they wouldn't just let anybody do that. You had to be an extraordinarily well put together person, character wise.
Mm.
And he's telling me how he's seen with his own eyes people eliminate arthritis, other autoimmune issues, reverse their type 2 diabetes, their mental illnesses, their depression, and their anxiety by only eating meat and drinking water. And I'm like, for real. Now, this is two people with incredible integrity telling me this. And then I found a talk by Amber O'Hearn just right after Dr. Baker. It was from Keto Fest 2017 when she explained in a way this guitar player could understand how, as a species, we literally came down out of the trees and grew these energy demanding brains and our skeletal structure to the extent that we have as a species by eating meat. And at the end of that, I'm like, I looked at my wife, I said, I have to do this. I can't not try. I have to give this a whirl. And so I did a little research on how to do it. And July 16th, 2018, I started eating meat and drinking water only. And today is my 1286th day of only eating meat and drinking water. And I have not had any cheat days. 10 days into it, I woke up without joint pain for the first time as an adult.
Wow.
I blew my mind. I never thought of myself as arthritic. I was never diagnosed. You know, I had aches and pains. You know, I was 57 years old. You fall down a few times when you're 57. And I'm a musician and play lead guitar. And I've jumped up on a few tables in clubs and had them go out from under me. And, you know, you protect your instrument and you keep on playing. And if you hurt for the next week, that's okay. That's rock and roll. But I never thought of myself as having joint problems. Man, you wake up without joint pain for the first time as an adult. I felt like a little boy. I'm taking my morning walk. I'm skipping down the sidewalk, giggling because it feels good and it doesn't hurt. And then on day 24, I get emotional about this because it's the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me. I'm taking my morning walk and it's like somebody flipped a switch. And all that darkness and all that sadness and all that rage and anger that had been keeping me from being the human being I wanted to be, it just all went away.
So good.
It just vanished like that. And it was replaced by a waterfall of joy that has not left me since, not for one moment. And that's why I do these talks, is because people need to know You're not broken. You're
Mm,
not a genetic error. Your mom and dad didn't make a
mm,
mistake. You were just like me. You were taught to eat things we should never have put into our mouth.
mm, mm.
And my quality of life today is just
Mm.
ridiculous.
That's beautiful.
I mean, in 5 months the anxiety was gone.
Mm,
In 10 months the insomnia was completely resolved.
mm,
I've been completely 100% symptom free from all mental illness issues for over 3 years now. I haven't had a headache since the middle of July in 2018. Not one flippin' headache
that's
after
beautiful.
decades of eating. Gosh knows how many vacations I paid for people that
Mm,
work at Tylenol because
mm,
I went through that stuff like crazy because
mm,
my head was always hurting. And I experience effortless daily happiness now. I wake up every morning in a wonderful mood. It never changes, and every day continues to be better than the day before.
wow. I can't help but just, let you talk about your story, which is a beautiful thing. If you're listening right now thinking that you cannot be helped, trust me, Brett had, years, decades of severe depression. And when I was listening through your story, that beautiful story you just talked about, is it started just having hope for yourself, just knowing you could get better. You may have times that you have uh, given up, but you found the solution because you were looking for it in moments. And I think the catalyst was when you've discovered cannabis, that helped you realize that eye-opening um, time where you saw yourself in the mirror, disgusted, wanting to get better, wanting to get back on Atkins, realizing that you were better when you were in Atkins. You got better when you were in Atkins, looking in the mirror, having that realization that I can do this. You can do this. And it started from there, just knowing that you could get better, that you could do this. So if you're listening right now thinking you cannot be helped, here's Brett telling his story. Decades of taking medication, decades of experiencing severe depression, insomnia, anxiety, right? But he never wavered. He always thought in himself that he could do it. He always thought in himself that he could get better. Because if you don't have that mentality, then you will get defeated by these anxiety, depression. Even if Brett talked about it. Even if his wife was talking about a beautiful day, when you have depression, you hear things differently. You hear things in a negative way. You believe things that isn't real because of your depression. It's so easy to blame ourselves. It's so easy to blame ourselves for what's happening. And by just changing the way you thinking, and you attract those things that could help you. Brett attracted these things. Brett attracted information that could help him, that started from looking at himself in the mirror, realizing that he could do this, right? And so I think with you starting the carnivore diet, eliminating other things that are so, and you talked about Jordan Peterson. If and you said if it was someone else telling you this, you may have just brushed it off. So it takes that's why we're here telling our stories, because we hope to we hope that these stories may struck a chord in you, just how Jordan Peterson did for Brett, right? It takes a
And
certain amount of person to tell a story and to be acceptance and to be honest with himself to tell this story with you today, because we Jordan Brett is here to tell his story so he could also help you, right? It's so beautiful, Brett. I just can't uh you know, I just can't help but just sit back and listen to your story and listen to you talk about it. um and let's Are you off all medications today, Brett?
I have not taken a pharmaceutical medication for over 3 years. The
Mm,
last pharmaceutical I had was an antibiotic in October of 2018. I got a upper
mm,
respiratory infection, and I had to do antibiotics to get rid of that. But I have not had any
mm,
pharmaceutical medication in over 3 years, and I won't take one again
mm,
unless something very severe. If I'm injured and in pain,
mm.
yes, I would take something then. But outside of that, I just don't see it happening.
You know, another thing that really struck me with your story is really nobody had connected the way of living, the way we eat, to depression, to anxiety, to our mood swings, right? And if and I can imagine, um, you know, you years ago experiencing mental health illness, because it's only been talked about now. It's only but before, it's such a stigma. It still has a stigma to this day, but it's slowly being talked about, it that we all have it. We all have mental health, right? And you're somebody that has known to be eating healthy, the healthy way of eating. You eat your vegetables, grains, and all that. But just because we follow that and we don't hear our doctors talk about nutrition too much, and too often our doctors just prescribe us medication, right, for whatever reason. So let me tell you, Brett, when I couldn't sleep for 3 days, I went to my doctor. um guess what? Guess what they did? They prescribed me with the sleeping medication, right? And sleeping isn't my problem. I was depressed. They gave me something so I could sleep. But I don't think sleeping was my problem. I have an underlying mental health issue that I have no education about. I was young at the time, right? And all too often when we are experiencing, you know, just a simple headache, we pop a pill, not realizing it's what we do, it's what we eat, and we just it's incredible to me because how you've suffered for decades and not connecting the dots because of our uh, I will never discount doctors. That they have a great place in this society, right? But it's their responsibility, because a lot of us follow their guidance, right? Till the cows come home, right? So if there is a slight, you know chance that you could get better through nutrition, it's their responsibility, because people believe what they say now. Like, people believe what they say. People are scared to get off medications because it's not recommended by their doctor. You have to be in these meds. You can't get off. If your doctor say don't get off these meds, you won't. Even if your friend told you about keto or carnivore, just because your doctor won't recommend it, you're scared to get off it, right? And so, you know, it's just such a, when I was listening to your story, m- the word that keeps repeating in my mind is hope. There's hope. There's hope. You suffered for decades, 40 years, and there's uh, the word that comes out is hope. There's hope for people now. There's
That
hope.
is so true. That is so true. And that's the reason why I go out of my way to keep my Instagram as positive as I do,
Mhm.
because, you know, if you're a light of hope, if you've got a spark of life in you that other people can see, well, you need to share it.
Mhm.
And I was blessed. I was so excited about all this, what was happening to me, and I was trying to document it. And then I learned, oh, there's podcasts about carnivore. I probably ought to go on one of those at least once and share my story and then get on with life. I figured maybe 10 people would listen and five would like it and five would think I was still crazy. Okay.
Mhm.
But I made the effort. And so I was fortunate enough to get myself on the Carnivore Cast, hosted by Scott Mislinski, and which, in my opinion, still one of the best carnivore related podcasts on the planet today. I highly recommend it. And I told my story there publicly for the first time, and I got overwhelmed with responses. And some lady even told me, I found hope in what you were in your story. What you were saying is I shouldn't give up, and that touched me.
Mhm.
That really touched my heart. And then there was a lady that I had grown up with. She's a few years older than I, but she's seeing me talk about what I'm doing on my Facebook. Now I'm not doing the big social media stuff or anything at that time. And she said, I've got primary progressive multiple sclerosis. And she gave me all these horrible things that were happening to her. And it told me that her neurologist said you'll spend most of the rest of your life in a wheelchair.
Mhm.
I said, well, I'm just a guitar player, but and I learned how to do this way of eating from these people zeroing in on health group on Facebook. It's where a lot of 10-year plus veterans of this way of eating hang out. And that's all they talk about is the carnivore way of eating. And that's where I learned the directions, which are so simple. And I need to share them real quick. Only eat when you're hungry first. Second is when you're hungry, only eat meat until you're not another bite full. Total satiation. Number three, only eat the meat you crave and can afford. Number four, under no circumstance do you ever put a sweet taste into your mouth. And I'm like, well, that's easy. There's nothing to measure. There's nothing to keep track of. You know, when I first looked into keto, I was like, are you serious? You want me to do all that work? No, I can't keep up with all that. But with carnivore, it was simple. And so I shared the directions with this woman. And month and a half later, she messaged me. She said, I fired that neurologist. I
Mhm.
said, you did? I said, how are you doing? She said, I'm completely symptom free after 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I knew right then, I can't keep this to I can't give you this on the down low. I have to share it wherever I can, because I couldn't ignore the possibility that there was a whole lot more people like me out there.
Exactly. That's what it's all about.
And so that's become a vocation of sorts for me, is to do these kinds of interviews. And
Hmm.
I've been blessed to be on a
So
lot
good.
and talk to a lot of wonderful people through the process. And as long as I got breath in me, I'm going to keep doing it, because people need to know you don't have to suffer
I
needlessly.
don't.
You don't have to take a medication for the rest of your life. And you can become the human being you were genetically supposed to be
Mm.
all
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And you being here today, inspires, maybe a few people, and we only hope to inspire that one person that would listen, right? um you talked about that woman that uh heard your story, that resonated with her, right? Your story resonated with her. That's what it's all about. That's why we're here. That's why we're getting together, talking about your story, because there are people out there that needs to hear it, that needs to hear this story, that may struck a chord in them, that finally uh they would make a change, right? um wow, amazing, Brett. I am so happy that you're here. I want to talk about how you coach and your coaching style. I know a lot of people out there are now curious on getting coach, because it's not easy to transition from a standard American diet into a carnivore diet. And so, if I am a client, Brett, where would you start me from the beginning if we had to start this week?
Well, the first thing I would want to know is, what's your reason for doing why do you need to do carnivore?
Mm,
And what is it you're trying to fix and or heal? Um, and then my next question would be, well, what's your diet been like for the last 6 weeks? And if you've been eating low carb, you're not going to have a difficult transition. If you're standard American diet that's very carbohydrate heavy, then I'm going to recommend that we take a month. You reduce your carbohydrate and plant intake by 25% each week and replace it with meat that you crave, that satisfies you, until you're at zero carbs. And then that's where the real goodness starts to take place. And that would be the first thing. And then once you're fully at zero carbs, then it's just a matter of following the directions and being patient.
mm,
Everybody doesn't heal as swiftly as I did. I was very low carb for a couple of years before I went carnivore. So I didn't have a difficult transition. I had a little gassiness. The last headache I've had since July, since that time, in over 3.5 years. Uh, that was it. A lot of people have flu-like symptoms. I did have loose stool too. I had loose stool for the first 5 months, but I didn't care when after I lost my depression symptoms on the 24th. I didn't care if I had loose stool for the rest of my life at that point. But that went away after 5 months, which interesting is the same time that the anxiety went away. And I think that what happened is my body became more fully fat adapted and more efficient at burning fat for energy at that time. And so a lot of fat that was getting pushed out in as loose stool now was being burned up for energy. And my hormones started to come into balance, and
mm.
life has just been beautiful ever since. Um, One quick thing to mention about it: when your hormones come into balance, everything starts to work as it was supposed to. I used to have to wear eyeglasses to drive a car. In June of 2019, I had to get my driver's license renewed. And I took my glasses in, and I'm like, okay, I brought my glasses. You want me to put them on to read the line? And she's like, no, try to read it without your glasses first. Okay. And I could read the line without my
Wow.
glasses. I was just stunned. Of
Mm.
all the things I'd heard, your eyesight improves. Are you serious? I didn't know that was possible. They were improved it was improved to the point that they took the eyeglass requirement off my driver's license. I don't have to wear glasses now to drive a
Wow.
car because I don't need them. Um, but I would instill in my coach. I try to instill this into all my clients. This is only as difficult as you choose to make it. If you want to make it complicated, you're going to struggle. I try to encourage all my clients to try to imagine what our ancestors 100,000 years ago were thinking.
Mm.
Were they measuring how much salt they were taking in a day? Were they measuring how much water they were drinking a day? Were they running macros on what their fat to protein ratio was? No, no, and no. They ate until they were full. And then that was it. Nothing more complicated than that. And if you survive childbirth, childhood illnesses, and stayed injury free, you got to live as long as we do today or longer.
Mm.
Keep it simple. I always encourage my clients, the people, and it's my experience, the people who succeed at this way of eating, they do two very important things. They take their ego and their scales and they put them in the trunk of their car where it'll do them the most good. Because
That's so good.
people get obsessed about weighing themselves every day, and all that, all weighing yourself does is show what your relationship to gravity is in that moment. It is not anything that indicates health or unhealth.
Mm.
And the rest of that, you know, worrying about every little thing, well, that just creates anxiety, and anxiety is a liar and leads to failure. And when folks follow the directions, they get better. They just get better. I've watched people come to me, Lawrence, they're on so many meds that, and they're so depressed, and they don't have the energy. They don't have the energy to even speak sometimes. And I've watched them start this way of eating and stick to it. And it wasn't always easy for them. It was almost always a struggle in the beginning because you have to change your mindset so significantly. And then you've got your illness in your head telling you all the reasons why this is stupid, why this is a bad idea. And they get better, and you see that light come on in their eyes. They're alert. They've got energy. And then you see them smile, and then you make them laugh. And it's just a joyful thing to behold. That's kind of what I do with my coaching. And I always make sure that my clients know that if they need me, here's how they can get in touch with me. So I hold people accountable. If you want to get better, you have to accept the fact you have to change certain habits and behaviors in the way you think about food. You can't call something that has no nutritional value food because it's not food. It's garbage that's been marketed as food. And you should never put that crap into your mouth. And I always ask every client every day, and I'll ask you the same question, Lawrence. How much effort does it take you to not drink bleach?
No effort. No effort.
That's how much effort it should take a rational human being to not put something in their mouth they know doesn't belong there.
So good.
And I keep it like that. I'm not somebody who gets into studies. I'm a guitar player. What do I know about studies? If I start trying to talk about that, I'll sound like every other, you see the podcasters and the YouTubers who are talking about things they don't understand at all. And it sounds like they're just reciting what they're reading, and it's meaningless.
That's why I love talking to people that came through like their own experience, people that talk about their own experience. That's wisdom right there. I was reading up on the reviews on your coaching page, and they talk about how positive you are and just the wisdom from experience that you have is just incredible. I want to ask you for the last question. What was the most memorable thing for you that a client said, maybe on the results that they have seen, or just being grateful? What was the most memorable thing that you've heard a client say to you?
A client who had had an ileostomy, and they were having difficulty figuring out how to eat enough meat without having to wake up 4 times through the night to change their ileostomy bag.
Mm.
And we figured it out together. And this person looked exhausted. I'll never forget when I first saw them on camera on Zoom, and they were just frustrated and depressed, and gosh, I they recognized this way of eating is all I've got to hope for. And I canceled patients. I said, now, we may make some mistakes along the way till we get everything figured out and dialed in. And then one day she's like, we've done it. It's working. I'm not, I got the big smile and my mood has been spectacular. I haven't had any anxiety in
That's
this many
beautiful.
days. I haven't felt depressed or frustrated at all about the eating and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I could see that her life was being transformed right in front of me.
Mm. Yeah.
And it wasn't over some big weight loss, or she didn't need to undergo a major physical transformation. She just needed somebody to support her through trial and error,
Mm.
essentially. And I'll never forget that. It was just I'd see that person's face when I conjured that story up, and I've had so many clients that I don't remember a lot of them, unfortunately, specifically, and I blame that also on having social media get so large.
Mm.
But you can't you can fake a smile, but you can't fake joy.
Love that.
And when you see that joy in their eyes,
Mm.
man, that's priceless.
Man, this has been so good, Coach Brett. Man, I appreciate you so much just coming on here and sharing your story. It takes a lot, really. Man, I'm a follower. I'm gonna follow you wherever you go, and you inspire a lot. You inspired me with your story, please continue to inspire more people, that because there's a lot of people out there that needs to hear this. Um, man, where can people find you? I want my listeners to be able to find you, and get connected.
The best place to find me is at thankful.carnivore on
Mhm.
Instagram. It's important that you put that dot between
Mhm.
the two words.
We'll put it in the description. We'll link
And
everything.
you can find me there. You can find me as Brett Lloyd on Facebook. I've got a Twitter. I don't do as much on Twitter as I used to, but I've still got Twitter there. It's at Stickman Bleeding, STICKMANBLEEDIN. Do not add a G. You won't get me if you add the G. And especially if you contact me on Instagram or Facebook and you have questions or concerns, don't hesitate to send me a private message. I read them all. I answer them all. I don't leave people hanging. I ignore nobody. Because I remember what it was like to be searching desperately for answers and not getting a response. And I would never do that to anyone.
This is so good. I can talk to you. I can listen to you all day, sir. Um, thank you so much. I am truly grateful to you, sir, and you truly inspired me. And man, no words, but just grateful, just truly grateful to you, and I'm so glad that you're telling your story, because you're changing people's lives here, and you've impacted me today. So I am truly grateful to you.
Well, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to speak with you and to share my experience with your audience. And I just want this last little parting thought: no matter what life throws at you, always remember you've got something to be thankful for. Don't forget that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.